This is the last meeting dedicated to the book Negative Psychoanalysis for the Living Dead, and we are discussing Epilogue, No Salvation. The general idea of the book was to guard the dimension of the negative. The black circle stands for the nothingness, and the tiny line around it stands for guarding it. So in other words, the aim of the book was to guard the negative, not to try to escape from it like it's normally done, especially in books that deal with human suffering. Like the intention of the book would be to escape, not to actually recognize suffering, to which in my terminology, which is strange, is to run away from negative insight. The negative insight is not, as we remember, it's more like blindness, the absence of insight, not the knowledge, but immobility rather. So when one deals, writing a book that deals with human suffering, the normal intention would be to reduce the suffering, to escape from it, to say what to do with it. Especially the one who themselves suffer from depression, it would be written in order to find the way out. And this book was intended to do the negative. It was intended to actually be dedicated to the space of negative, to what depression opens up, the dimension that depression opens up, actually discovering it, discovering what is there, what is it that depression might tell us. So it's not aimed at salvation, and it's the salvation and the position of Messiah is not something that I was intended to occupy. And the position of expert, saying something, someone who possessed knowledge and transferred this knowledge, this is also not the position that I was intended to occupy. It's the because one of the reasons, because it implies manipulation, like guidance somewhere. And I was trying to speak not from the position of a guidance, but from the position of what the hell, like not knowing. And nothing practical actually follows from the negative insight, or from the space of the negative. It cannot be practiced because it's not aimed at cure or even revelation of some kind of knowledge. And whoever would come really close to dealing with the negative, or what I call the negative, they would also simultaneously escape it. For example, even Zapfer, who is a great inspiration for this book, and who comes really close to seeing the negative at the core of everything, and everything else is every cultural practice, especially therapy, as escaping from it. Even he offers, talks from a position of Messiah, and offers some kind of negative form of salvation. This is, we're not supposed to exist anymore because we suffer too much, then we just should stop existing, which is also form of salvation, and also escape from suffering. Not actually talking about suffering, just talking about it to get rid of it. But so nothing practical follows out of it, or I was trying to be devoted to the dimension of the negative without occupying the position of Messiah. But still, then I decided that I shouldn't worry that much about it, because this human thinking works in a way that it always deduces something positive out of any negativity, and tends to find consolation. Even the language works in a way that it structures reality, gives meaning to reality. So the language and thinking probably contradict to the negative insight, these insights of depression. So we find consolation in everything, even something that does not intend and clearly says that it's not aiming to provide consolation. So I was trying to elaborate in the epilogue some of the possible forms of what kind of consolation or practical implementation one might find in the book, which I would claim is wrong to do it. Like one would claim, and I was talking about different dimensions which books involves with. This is the individual dimension of society, and dimension of the nature. So from reading probably any chapter, one could find or deduce some practical tips what to do. this is the one of the examples, like you can learn to embrace or love yourself or the other, embrace that you're already living dead and that nothing, you won't have salvation, this no one will save you. And the other is you might learn to love the other, accepting that the other is already lost, forever lost, and it's painful, and that they also undergo pain, their life existence is painful, and that there is no one who is going to save us. So something like it. And so practical implementations are possible, something that is possible to deduce out of this book, but it would be wrong, because actually negative insight doesn't contradicts the very idea of it, contradicts the idea of improvement or any practical suggestions of what to do. It's not about what to do or what has to be done. And my favorite, the worst one, it would be, at least to my taste, the worst one would be to feel superior to in relation to others, which is normally the mood of depressive realism. In depressive realism wants the position that once you're depressed, you know reality better, and which implies that you kind of feel superior to others who are more naive, more positive. And it's still very practical and still suggests the improvement. You know the truth and you some kind of superior to others. So all the kinds of positive outcomes are possible to deduce out of this book, but all of them would be wrong, because it wasn't the idea of the book. It's just not supposed to improve anything, not supposed to guide anything, anyone, anywhere. And it's rather about the negative things, like there is no salvation, it won't get better. There is no one who would save us, and nobody knows. No one would ever know what to do. Just all the horror, and all feel the horror and despair in their hearts, and maybe looking for salvation, but ultimately failing in it. And then the book ends with the epic fail, because while claiming that nothing practical follows out of this book, at the end I'm suggesting the idea of negative practice, which I actually practice. But after claiming that nothing practical follows out of it, I'm elaborating on the idea of negative practice. But at least conscious that it's dead on arrival, like it's destined to fail and it's impossible. And basically, if it functions as impossibility of itself. So the idea of negative practice or negative psychoanalysis as something that would be not, instead of avoiding the negative insight, it would rather be devoted, dedicated to this negative dark space. And it wouldn't be aimed at salvation, or it wouldn't aim to help anyone, unlike conventional psychoanalytic practice and especially other psychotherapeutic practices that are rather escaping it, offering salvation in various forms, or offering improvement or guidance, trying to improve something, so operating within positive framework. This practice would be, on the contrary, devoted to the negative insight, to the negative space, and it won't betray inner lack like Freud did, even though he embraces the idea of the death drive, but he was still embracing it and rejecting it at the same time, while because one of the reasons he's still preserving the initial idea of psychoanalytic practice that was initially aimed at salvation improvement, at least in the minimum modest form, but still. So that would be psychoanalysis, maybe, or some kind of practice that would be devoted to the late Freud, which claimed that psychoanalysis doesn't cure, just more honestly in this case. So it won't, and again, just to show you, this is now the picture, the formula of the negative practice. So it doesn't cover the lack, doesn't cover the void, which is structural. It embraces it. sees it as structural since in it stays devoted to it, and not trying to cover it with a fantasy, not offering any kind of promise of salvation, or without aiming at salvation. It won't give the diagnosis or interpretation, because diagnosis is the promise of cure or the direction how to fix what has to be fixed. It won't be guiding anyone anywhere, and it won't be performed in a form of experts guiding the group of people, or one person, an elephant somewhere, and in exchange of money. It won't have, therefore, hierarchical structure where someone possesses knowledge or technique and the other one is operated upon. And it won't exchange knowledge or effort on money, and the only thing that it will be shared is the nothing. The only thing which is we all, according to Todd McGovern, we all genuinely share. The only thing is nothingness or the lack, because which means that this practice that embraces the lack or doesn't escape from it coincides with the nature of the tragic nature of human relationship and the subjectivity as such. And as practice, it would be rather a parody of psychoanalysis, which it is already, but it exists by rejecting itself, by self-criticism. But maybe more honestly and more openly, the parody of itself existing as a failure is maybe being closer in this way to any human life. So by rejecting itself, or by negating itself, by approaching its own annihilation within the space of its absurdity. And the last slide was hard. So the negative practice would be, instead of running away into positive illusions, just enduring the negative dimension of hopelessness, and negative practice as the guardian of the negativity and the sacred temple to nothing and nobody, with the space of the absence of messiahs and the space of the meaninglessness in which we all, I think, genuinely coincide. Right. So that's it. Thank you, and I will stop recording it and ask you if you have any questions.